Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Hashing Out the Law. Today, my guest is Michael Stockham. Michael is a big law lawyer. He's been practicing law for over 20 years. He's a litigator. He's done some amazing cases, but he's also a best-selling author. And I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to let Michael take over. Hi, Michael. How are you?
I'm fantastic today, Arash. I appreciate it. It's a blessing to be on.
Thank you for being on. You are in the Midwest, correct?
I am in Dallas, Texas. Yes, sir. Central time zone.
Dallas, Texas. I've been to Dallas, nice city. Um, Michael, let's talk about you. When I say you, let's talk about your background. Let's talk about how you started, and so the viewers and the listeners understand who you are. I know I said you're a litigator and you've been practicing for over 20 years, but could you give us a little bit more details, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So currently in my position, I'm a partner at a large law firm called Holland and Knight. We're about 2,000 lawyers, mostly here in the continental United States. So what they would call a full service firm. My practice generally, what I do is I work with companies that have situations with either the government, shareholders, or auditors. So I do a lot of work, SEC, DOJ, shareholder class actions, derivative suits, proxy fights, and then internal investigations related to whistleblowers. And I've been doing that for about 25 years. But I didn't arrive at being a lawyer in a direct route. It was somewhat circuitous, if you will.
I was actually going to talk about that. So I ask all my guests this question, the ones who are lawyers. So I'm going to take you back to that point in your life where something clicked in your mind that you said you want to be a lawyer. Let's start there. What was it that clicked in your mind that said you wanted to be a lawyer? And then take us down that path.
Well, the point is probably kind of late in life for some folks. I went back to law school when I was 28, 29 years old. And at that point, I decided that I wanted to have a career and a profession. But prior to that, I had been a bit of a wanderer. So my initial bachelor's degree is in writing poetry. My subsequent master's degree was out of Texas A&M for writing short stories. And then I sort of wandered and roamed from various jobs, mason's apprentice, dishwasher, technical writer, medical salesperson, telemarketer, until I discovered or decided internally that maybe doubling down and going after a career, going to law school was probably a reasonable path. And that's about the time that it hit.
But why law school? Why didn't you decide to be like a physician or a banker or a stockbroker?
So the law has always intrigued me, especially courtroom work. I think it naturally fits doing trial work, doing trial law fits very well with the concept of story, of narrative, of persuasion. That's what you do in fiction. That's what you do in poetry. You draw images. You try to help people understand experience. So it had a natural gravitational pull to the things that were of deep interest to me personally. So I do, you know, if there's one thing I could do over, I might go back and get a JD MBA and spend the extra year to get the additional education in the finance and business side of things. But really, the law had a pull to sort of an internal calling in myself.
Awesome. So you passed the bar. Did you start right away with Holland and Knight, or did you start somewhere else?
I started straight out of law school. I started with a judge here in town, judge by the name of Judge Barbara Lynn, brilliant jurist, wonderful. She's been on the bench a little over 20 years, 25 years, I think. And so I was a law clerk to a federal judge for a year, and then I joined my firm that at that time was Thompson and Knight. It had been a long storied regional Texas firm. It actually was founded straight after the Civil War. And then Thompson and Knight in 2001, 2021, 22 merged into Holland Knight, and we became part of a much larger organization.
So you were there from the beginning of the new Holland and Knight. That's awesome.
Yes, I have been here basically in the same office for doing the same kind of stuff for almost 2.5 decades.
So now let's talk about your books. I know you mentioned that your undergrad degree was in poetry.
Right?
Um, but what made you decide that you want to write a book? Was this something you wanted to do when you were younger, or something happened that made you decide that?
There's always been a draw to writing novels or bigger projects, if you will. Poetry is very tight uh, and and image driven. Short stories are a little bit more of freedom from that, but the idea of actually taking on a full length manuscript of 75,000 or 100,000 words seemed like a very interesting and sort of fun task to push forward with. And so actually doing the noveling is something that I've always had a draw to, something that I thought I would ultimately end up doing. And I just arrived at a point in my life where I had the time and ability to do it. And so I started studying it and working at it and have been relatively successful at it.
Let's talk about your latest book, and correct me if I'm wrong. This is your latest book, Jake Fox, Ties That Blind, correct?
That is correct. That
Okay.
is the latest book that was just published in December of last year.
So now the book is fiction, but it has to do with a lawyer who is going or trying to cope with his daughter's suicide, correct?
Correct.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is somewhat of a redemption story in which Jake Fox does lose his daughter to suicide and moves back to his hometown in a fictional Texas town called Haven, Texas, to sort of get himself together and get his life back on track. And while he's there, he enters into sort of a small town practice, something that he thought would be a reasonable speed to get back into it, and is immediately confronted with the reality that he's going to end up defending a teenage girl who's been accused of murdering her father. And so his life, while he was trying to calm it down, spins up into controversies and chaos.
It's like a legal thriller, correct?
It is a legal thriller, yes, sir.
Okay. And if I want to buy this book, where can I get it?
So both my books are out on Amazon. So that's the easiest place to get it. And it's, print on demand. So it comes quickly.
We're going to include the links to your books in the description of the podcast so the listeners and the viewers can get it. Now, you said my two books. Let's talk about your other book.
Okay. So the first book was, first novel is Confessions of an Accidental Lawyer. And that book is inspired, it interleaves two different stories, a personal story about a young couple trying to have another baby after complications with the first, and a young lawyer's first trial in federal court, which is a civil rights lawsuit on behalf of a prisoner in solitary confinement. And so we interwove those two stories on a central chronology, and it's part legal thriller, part domestic thriller, and it's inspired by true events. So it was a lot of fun to write.
Can we talk about those true events, or are they personal, or
No, we
okay.
we absolutely can. So especially the civil rights case, it was the inspiration was a case that I was appointed to by a magistrate judge here, Irma Ramirez, who now sits on the Fifth Circuit. Excellent judge, real humanitarian. And she had a prisoner case that the prisoner had made it past summary judgment, meaning they were going to have to go to trial. The one hiccup or problem was that this prisoner was in solitary confinement 23 hours a day, so really had no functional way of preparing for trial, interviewing witnesses. So Judge Ramirez appointed myself and another lawyer in my firm, Dave Schulte, and we both represented this prisoner in a federal court trial up in Wichita Falls, Texas.
Now, your other book, Jake Fox, is that inspired by a true story or true event, or is it completely fiction?
That one is a detour into pure imagination, which is to a certain extent somewhat freeing because when you do something inspired by true events, sometimes you feel tethered a little bit to the history of it all because you know people in the community, you know people around that know what happened. So you want to be accurate in the telling of certain events that inspire the story. Uh, but when you do Jake Fox, it's just whatever I want to happen to the characters next happens.
So you have a lot more freedom and you get to be creative.
Absolutely. It does rev up the creativity and it's really it is really fun and it's really interesting to come up with characters not based on actual events. You get to infuse all the different characteristics or many characteristics from people that you've known over your life into those characters and give them the quirks and foibles that human beings have.
Now, I know as a trial lawyer, you have to be creative, whether you're defending or whether you're prosecuting a case. Uh, and then as a writer, you have to be creative as well. Is your in your experience as a trial lawyer, the creativity that you had to use, do you think it helped you in writing, or is that completely different tool set?
I think they're married pretty tightly. And one of the principles I think that marries those is just the power of story. So if you think about it, whether it's a short story, a poem, or a novel, you're trying to create a narrative, you're trying to be precise, you're trying to be crisp, you're trying to convey emotions, facts, and a plot. And those factors all figure into trial law. You're trying to communicate to people in a limited amount of time to push or advance your client's best interests, whether that's at trial or representing them in front of the government. And so the power of story, the ability to communicate a story and put facts and circumstances in an order can be very, very helpful. So I think one informs the other and they're very much wedded together.
Now, you don't have to answer this because maybe your partners might be seeing this podcast. What do you enjoy more, being a lawyer or a writer?
I enjoy them both immensely for a couple of different reasons. I enjoy the creativity and freedom and the joy of writing, of doing the novels, because that's really an idea of self-expression. The working at the firm is a little bit different, but the joy there comes from the fact if you do trial law, you're constantly learning new things. No case is the same. The rules of civil procedure stay the same, but there's different industries, different persons, different personalities. So it's never boring. So the practice of law is great for a whole host of wonderful reasons, and writing novels is great for a series of other reasons, but they do marry up very well together.
So let's dive back and talk about Jake Fox.
Okay.
Uh, the character, we know it's fiction, and we talked about how you had the freedom to be very creative with the story because it was just pure imagination. But is Jake Fox a character that was completely made up? When I say that, I mean, is he like a Frankenstein of all these different lawyer personalities that you come across, or is he completely a figment of your imagination?
So I think he's a product of my imagination in a lot, but imagination is fed by experience. So there are quirks or characteristics that probably come close to lawyers that I've met. So he can be thought of as a composite from those experiences. And there are some other characters in the book. One of the other main characters is a gentleman by the name of Hitch, who is somewhat comedic in how we use him, but he is definitely infused with some of the lawyers that I've known over my life, especially out of the Houston trial bar.
So can we, I don't want to give away the plot or all the details of it, but let's talk about, can we talk about Hitch and Jake and some of the other
Sure,
characters?
sure,
So
absolutely.
so you said we use Hitch in a comedic fashion. So I believe he brings a little lightheartedness to the story, which can be intense at times. Um, what, how does Jake and Hitch, how do they meet or how do they come together?
So they are a product of Hitch was Jake's original mentor when Jake was a much younger lawyer. And so when Jake moves back to Haven, it's just sort of natural that Hitch takes him back under his wing and brings him in for them to work together in their law office. So it's a long-term friendship. To a certain extent, it's a father-son relationship. And to a certain extent, Hitch is there just to take the pressure off of the intensity of parts of the book when that's helpful to the reader.
Excuse me, I feel a sneeze coming. Um, so Jake has moved back. He's trying to go into practice in the little sleepy town where he was originally from so he can cope with the tragedy that has happened with his daughter. He gets plunged into this case, which he's representing a young lady who's accused of murdering his father, correct?
Correct.
And tell us a little bit about that. How does that mess with him and how does that play along in the book? And if, without giving away, in the end, does he achieve his goal of obtaining Zen or calmness?
So a couple of three different questions in there.
Yes.
I think it's difficult for Jake. The woman, and this is on purpose, but the young lady accused of murder is pretty much a doppelganger to his daughter. So it creates a lot of internal psychological tension with him, especially the idea of failing somebody so close to his daughter Lucy again. So that creates some problems there. The idea of achieving Zen is probably something that occurs over the lifetime of the series. The book has been conceived as one out of nine. Really, I thought of it as three different trilogies. And so the actual journey to Zen probably takes longer than just the first book and maybe into many, many more, certainly past the first trilogy. So that's part of the draw to the idea of a series is to take a character like that and have them grow over a very long character arc.
That was going to be my question. Is Jake Fox a one-time character or not? Which you answered. So, three different trilogies. This is the first of nine books that you are planning on writing. When is the second one coming?
Second one is we're currently well into the draft. We'll probably have that out later this year. With the third book, the final book in this first trilogy, due out sometime in the spring 2026. So we're learning how to produce novels, write novels, get this process more quickly, more efficient. And my hope is to turn the novels out in a more rapid fashion so that the momentum behind the book can continue.
Let me ask you this. Can you give us a little teaser of the plot of the next two books?
So it's the same characters, so it involves the same central characters. So those folks don't disappear in the first from the first book, and the general themes continue on. One of the plots in the book or subplots relates to essentially trafficking of young women as sort of a subplot that relates to a gang that is involved with that. And so the idea of that issue and those risks carries throughout the three books.
Awesome. Now you're in Dallas. I'm in LA. Is there a chance of me seeing you in LA when you come here to have your book turned into a movie?
That is part of the hope, right? That is part of the plan. You want to always have the options to take these stories as far and wide as you can. When you write something, you want to share it, and certainly cinema and the movies are a logical, hopeful step.
Now, for those of the viewers and listeners, we're talking about Jake Fox. That's the main character and also the main title of the first book. You can always correct me if I'm wrong. Jake Fox ties that blind. I'm assuming that title is chosen on purpose because you're introducing Jake Fox to everybody, correct?
Correct. So the three books, the concept is that the books will always start with Jake Fox and then have a tagline. So the first trilogy is um, uh, Jake Fox ties that blind, Jake Fox don't forsake me, and Jake Fox rest of the wicked.
I'm very intrigued about the trilogies that you're talking about. So we have the first trilogy, the second
Correct.
trilogy, and the third trilogy. Let me ask you, why did you decide that it's three different trilogies that come in three? Is it with you tell me.
Well, it's the idea of playing with different lengths of narrative arcs. So the idea of doing nine books allows or caters to my sort of odd curiosity of how long can you keep a narrative arc going? That seems like a lot of fun. Uh, Wrapping up a story in just one book seemed perfunctory or too short. So carrying a core concept or core idea through three books allowed for a little bit longer character arc, but then it you weren't dragging some central themes out for a total of nine books. So it allows for some things, some items to be wrapped up in one book or each book. It allows some items to be wrapped up in groups of three and the three at the end of each trilogy. And it allows some items or character growths to be wrapped up at the end of the nine books.
But all three trilogies are Jake Fox, correct?
Yep, they're all going to be in Haven. They're all going to be set with Jake Fox and different events that happen in that small town.
And if you know, what is the time period between the first book and the last book? Have you decided that?
I haven't yet decided that. And some of that's in the creative process. It just happens when it does. The first book is deals with a trial, and so it's a longer story. It's probably several months, several months to a year. The second book is probably no long. It takes place over a total of 10 to 14 days, and the third book will probably be longer again. So it could be growth over 5 or 10 years, or it could all be something that happens in just a few couple years. We'll just have to see how my imagination starts to plan it.
That's awesome. You actually not, I kind of want to be a writer too now. It's just because of all the opportunities you get to be creative and imaginative. I can only imagine how much fun you must be having doing that.
It is a lot of fun. I suggest you do it, and I suggest anybody that's ever thought about doing it um, be serious about it because it is a very interesting, educational, and rewarding process.
Let me ask you this. How do you find time to do all that with the Jake Fox uh, triple trilogy and being a lawyer for a big law firm that's nationwide?
Yeah, a lot of that comes down to schedules and systems. So I'm an early riser. I'm typically out of bed somewhere between 3 and 5 a.m. and have time to either get to work and get my work out of the way and then write, or write and then get to work. And then some of it's, like I said, systems, trying to break down the writing process so that each one of these books becomes more efficient by taking bite-sized items every day.
I have a question for you, not related to Jake Fox or law. What time do you go to bed?
Sometimes I tend not to be very I'm not much of a night owl anymore like I used to be, but I probably go to bed around 8:30 or 9 and read for an hour. I like to read a lot of other novels. I like to read a lot of other thriller writers. One, just for enjoyment, and two, for curiosity about how I can try to make my books even better.
I myself try to get up every day around 5 so I can do some work, but I also have the problem of being a night owl, so I haven't learned the balance yet. Uh, I'm hoping that you can be my inspiration when I think of, what I need to do. Um, Michael, it's been a pleasure having you on. I could keep you on here forever and keep talking about Jake Fox and the 9 books you have planned out because I'm very intrigued about it, especially because it's a lawyer and a lawyer writing about a lawyer. And Trial lawyers are my favorite lawyers. Um, Before we leave, anything else you want to leave the viewers and listeners with? It could be about your book. It could be nuggets about life lessons you've learned or advice, anything you want.
Yeah, sure. I think one last thing is to just reiterate, if everybody knows somebody that said, "Hey, I'm going to write a novel one day," and my advice would be to get to it. Just do it. It's the hardest part is just getting started, and after that, it becomes a whole lot of fun.
Thank you. Again, Michael Stockham, big law lawyer, author, successful author. His books are available on Amazon. We're going to include the links in the description of the podcast. You guys be sure to check it out. It was a pleasure having you on, Michael. You have a good day.
Thank you much. It's a blessing to be on.